Access to Telecommunications Networks Bill, second reading.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you, sir. I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Access to Telecommunications Network Bill seeks to ensure that wherever you live, you can choose which operator your mobile phone will connect to. Now, we've held a series of Westminster Hall debates on this on Wednesday, and so there is inevitably an element of repetition, but I do think that if something's worth saying once, it's probably worth saying twice as well, and there is good cross-party support for improving and speeding up the rollout of the shared rural network. The shared rural network, obviously, is the government's scheme to increase 4G coverage from 91% to 95% of the UK landmass by 2025, and it's welcome, as is the investment by the government of £500 million on new masts for those areas which are total not-spot areas where no signal is currently available at all. But the rollout isn't progressing as quickly as we would like, and so this bill is seeking to improve or speed up the rate at which people in places in my constituency like Cockshut, War or West Felton can use a usable phone signal from more than one provider wherever they travel in the local area. Now, improved rural coverage is really important for all sorts of reasons. Most importantly to me, it's one of the top issues raised by my constituents. I had a series of open meetings over the summer, and it comes up time and time again as something that people find really frustrating in their day-to-day lives. So if it's their issue, it's my issue as well, and that's one of the reasons I've been so keen to pursue it in this place. According to a survey for the Country Land and Business Association, 80% of rural business owners said improved connectivity would be the single largest improvement to their business. Now, this is partly because they struggle to recruit, and that's linked to poor public transport. But it's very important for the people that they might want to employ as well to be able to access a wider range of job opportunities and to work flexibly from home in a way that isn't always available to people in rural areas at the moment. Mobile phones have also been cited as the default backup option in a power cut once the copper landline network is switched off in the next couple of years. And I would like to emphasise how concerning that is, particularly to the elderly population in my constituency who might be a little bit less familiar with using voice over internet technology, but also with everybody in the area who's worried about what happens when a big power cut occurs. Because we're rural, we're not put back online on the power as quickly as some urban areas, and those backup batteries for routers will only last for 1 to 2 hours. Sometimes we're off for much longer than that. And if you're on your own at home in the dark and frightened, you might want to be able to call someone other than the emergency services in the event of a power cut. So it's a really important point that people can access their mobile provider, whoever that might be, when the power's down. Survey respondents to a survey conducted by Building Digital UK recently cited poor mobile coverage as a major factor exacerbating poor outcomes from agricultural injuries. And not wishing to dwell on disaster, a couple of years ago we saw a number of combine harvester fires across my constituency. Now, if they're in a partial not spot, those people can already ring 999 from their phone, but they might want to call all sorts of other people to come and help out in that situation. And it's not just 999 calls that can be affected. I did a shift with an ambulance crew just over a year ago, and the ambulance crews used a mobile signal to download patient data onto the tablets that they are using to help with their condition. And we visited an elderly lady who was very, very poorly near Ellesmere, quite close into the town centre, and the ambulance crew couldn't download her medical record, and it meant that her care was necessarily compromised from what somebody in an urban area might expect. And finally, it reduces digital inequality, something that's talked about a lot in this place. There are lots of people who don't feel that comfortable on a full computer connected to the broadband, but they have learned how to use a phone. It's part of everyday life, and if they can't use it as they move around their daily routine, then they're left out to a greater extent. Now, of course, we all understand that there's technical challenges to building masts in rural areas, not least just getting a power supply out there. And that's why there's a disparity between rural and urban areas. And that is a fact of life of living in a rural area. I think people do understand that. But it does mean that we're one of the worst served areas in North Shropshire in the country. Under 60% of premises have coverage indoors from all operators, where the average for the whole of the UK is 86%. And once you move away from the towns into the villages, it's less than 1 in 3 who are able to choose which operator they have in their home. And as we know, because we've talked about it at length and the Minister acknowledged in oral questions recently, the data for coverage is very, very optimistic, and it doesn't always reflect actually what's going on the ground. So when I go and talk to people in North Shropshire, I've been to Trefonen, for example, some of the maps say that they should have coverage. That's not their lived experience. And I think there's also an issue of capacity, whereby the coverage might be there, but your call might drop out regularly because there are other people linked up to that mast at the same time. So the data that we're using to assess the success of the rollout, I think, is very important. Now, the shared rural network has involved, as I mentioned earlier, the 4 mobile network operators spending £500 million to end partial hotspots. And EE, because it already had an extensive network of mobile masts, has already met its obligations, and the deadline was June 2024, so it's 6 months ahead. But the other 3 providers have requested a delay, according to reports in the Telegraph, and that's down to a number of reasons. Some of them difficult to overcome, lack of planning resource, the logistical challenges I mentioned earlier, and issues over access to land. And those are impacting the delivery of the shared rural network. And it's interesting that not a single mast that will be delivered by the government for the total hotspots has been built yet, according to the House of Commons Library briefing. So there are challenges that are difficult to overcome, but part of the problem is that EE hasn't shared its masts. They failed to reach agreement with the other mobile network operators. Now, this is a commercial issue. This was part of the commercial negotiations. And so whether EE were asking for too high a rate or whether the mobile operators were offering too low a rate is a matter of perspective. But the reality is we could have achieved better coverage without blighting the countryside with a load of additional masts if those operators had shared their network equipment effectively. And that's where this bill comes in, because it seeks to ensure that they do share their equipment wherever that's possible and penalise them where they don't. And the rate at which they would share it would be determined by Ofcom to help ease the commercial discussion along. But the issues of sharing, and sometimes it's not possible, sometimes you need a bigger, wider, stronger mast, and that's not possible where their current ones exist, brings me to the solution of rural roaming, which is strongly opposed by the industry. The industry argues that it's a shorter battery life, you might drop your calls, it doesn't deal with total hotspots, and perhaps most importantly, it would undermine future investment, presumably because competitive advantage would be undermined. But an EFA report in 2019 said it would achieve an equivalent result to the shared rural network, be achievable in around 18 months, and an Ofcom report of 2018 said that the cost didn't appear disproportionate. Now, since those reports, the shared rural network agreement has been signed, but there are significant concerns, as I mentioned, about the speed of rollout, about the quality of the data that we're using to judge success, and also about the fact that this is yesterday's technology that we're not there yet on in the countryside, and the rest of the country is hoping to get 5G or standalone 5G in the near future. So the bill seeks to address those shortfalls by requiring the Secretary of State to improve rural roaming by incentivising companies to engage in that. So, in conclusion, Mr Deputy Speaker, I can't emphasise enough, separately to the mechanism of this bill, the importance of having better data so that when the shared rural network is assessed against its objectives, we can see whether the experience of people on the ground is actually there. We know that rural roaming won't happen unless we force the companies to do it, because they've already showed such strong resistance, and the government has acknowledged that. So this bill works alongside the shared rural network by taking steps to improve the actual infrastructure sharing and encouraging rural roaming wherever that's possible. Because if you're out and about in your day and you're with an operator that works at your home and you have an accident, or your mum falls over at home and they call an ambulance but they can't get hold of you to tell you, that's a really problematic situation in the modern age, and we really need to ensure that people in rural areas are connected wherever they go and not just when they're in their home or place of work. Thank you.
Question is that the bill be now read a second time. Matt Rodda.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I want to address a number of issues when responding for the official opposition. And I would also like to take this opportunity to underline the importance of increasing access to broadband and the wider need for greater connectivity. Turning first to the bill, the Honourable Member for North Shropshire's bill would have two effects, as I understand it. First, as she mentioned, it would require mobile network operators to share their network infrastructure for a reasonable price. And secondly, it would incentivise operators to allow customers of other companies to roam onto their network. And as the Honourable Lady mentioned, this is known as rural roaming and is similar to what currently happens when travelling abroad. These measures are intended to tackle partial not spots. However, it's worth noting that the bill would not address total not spots. That's areas which do not receive any coverage from any mobile network operator. Mr Deputy Speaker, turning to the first of these effects, there are indeed occasional concerns about telecom networks having infrastructure access. And as I understand it, one of the main issues is in areas like the City of Hull, where there is a monopoly company, in this case it's KCOM, or in situations around the rest of the country where Openreach has the monopoly provider. And across the country there have been repeated issues around the use of telecoms infrastructure. In particular, this includes the repeated digging up of roads. There are legitimate questions about whether I will give way.
I thank the Shadow Minister for giving way, and we've seen this issue of digging up roads in my constituency at the moment. Virgin Media are creating absolute chaos across my constituency, digging up the roads, and the work that they're doing in terms of putting back once they've been there is an utter disgrace. So would my honourable friend...
Order. Debate to be resumed what day?
Friday the 22nd of June.
Friday the 22nd of June.
Health and Social Care, Recruitment and Retention of Staff in Rural Areas Bill, second reading.
Not moved.
Cancer Research Funding, Report to Parliament Bill, second reading.
Not moved.
Carers and Care Workers Bill, second reading.
Not moved.
Bus Services Bill, second reading.
Object.
Objection taken. Second reading what day?
Friday the 22nd. Friday the 21st of June. My apologies.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Friday the 21st of June.
Friday the 21st of June.
Public Transport Rural Areas Bill, second reading.
Object.
Objection taken. Second reading what day? Friday the 21st of June.
Pets Microchips Bill, second reading.
Object.
Objection taken. Second reading what day?
Friday the 2nd of February.
2nd of February. Thank you.